Well, my interest in free schools is really a sort of general interest in education, an interest particularly in schools in Hammersmith. I'm actually the governor of chairman of the governors of a primary school in a different borough, but I have been a mentor at one of the schools in Hammersmith, the Hammersmith Academy, and I'm very interested in primary school associated with St Peter's Church. So free school, as you know, is a interesting and for some people controversial initiative, and the man behind it, Toby Young, is a interesting character who puts across his views very keenly, and I'm also interested in how free schools fit in with the government's policy on education generally. So that's really the background to my interest in free schools. I was unsure quite what it was seeking to achieve. I found it hard. I think this may be true of a lot of people, even those who are quite well sort of versed in education, to understand both the rationale either for free schools or the academies, which is in some ways a sort of linked, though more established sort of program. And I'm on the committee of a local residents association, and we asked Toby Young, because the site for the free school that he's established was initially very close to, well, it's going to both the place where they've started and the place they're moving to are both very close to where I live and where the residents association, the area the residents association represents. So we asked Toby Young to come along, and I think it's true to say that a lot of people who are very sceptical, having heard him, came away feeling that this was a very worthwhile and potentially beneficial initiative. But it did take a little while to understand quite what the rationale and motivation for it all was. The benefits of the proposals. Well, obviously it's going to give more choice. It's a different type of school. What I think a number of parents have felt for some time is that the schools that were available in the local areas, it happened for various reasons. Hammersmith as a borough hasn't had as many secondary schools as the number of secondary school children would warrant. So it provides a different type of school, and it provides more secondary school places locally. Historically, Britain hasn't had a nationally regulated curriculum. There have been national exams, obviously, going back to the exam school leaving certificate from the old elementary schools, and then after the war, the 1944 Education Act, the O-level and A-level. But there hasn't been a nationally prescribed curriculum. That was something that a lot of people felt was more in character of continental countries. So I'm not personally one of those people who necessarily feels that a national curriculum per se is necessary or even desirable. But on the other hand, there has been in the past a lot greater variety of choice in secondary schools until comprehensive schools were introduced in the 1960s, essentially. And I think there's a huge advantage in allowing parents to decide for themselves whether they wish to send their children to schools that rigidly follow the national curriculum or not. So, in short, I don't see this as a disadvantage. I could see that there is an argument for having a more prescribed curriculum, a national curriculum in the primary schools and the secondary schools, because essentially in a primary by the age of 11, it's essentially the key requirement is that children should have been taught to read, write, and add up, do sums, do maths to a certain level, and other subjects aren't really not so necessary. But at the same time, I would think that there could be disadvantages in applying national curriculum to primary schools as well. They can become very rigid, and they can lead to quite a set formulaic way of teaching simply to meet the needs of the national curriculum, and that can be hard on professionals, where you lose some of their spontaneity and creativity and professional input. So I could see there's a stronger case in primary schools than there is in secondary schools, but even in primary schools I wouldn't be totally convinced that it's essential. Yes, and I don't myself see that necessarily. You know, behind your question is the sort of implicit assumption that pushier parents should in some sense be held back, or the parents who want to push their children. But these are often children who are going to be able to make the most of their abilities, and I suppose if I was to sort of advocate anything, it would be that more parents should be pushy rather than that the children of pushy parents should be held back. I don't actually know so much about the sort of individual circumstances there, but I would want to question the people who criticise this decision. I want to question them very, very carefully, because so often, I mean, I'd like to find out more about their objections to this merger or closure, whatever it is, because so often I've found that it's people who are against any change, and circumstances are changing, population is changing, people's tastes are changing, and financial requirements and demands are changing, and all of those mean that those people who feel that it's reasonable to maintain a particular number of schools or a particular number of hospitals and so on are really burying their heads in the sand. So I certainly wouldn't go along with those people who feel that any closure is wrong or any merger is wrong, but I don't know enough about the facts of this particular one. But I can see that there must often be cases, however disappointing it is for the staff and people who got to know and like their school over a long period, but I wouldn't automatically think it must be wrong. Circumstances change and you have to make changes to meet those. I think the parents can decide that. The big thing about free schools is it's giving parents more choice, and I'm not sure that there's any value in making a sort of blanket judgment. I mean, clearly if a school had no qualified teachers, that would be odd, and it would be odd for parents to want to send their children to a school that had no qualified teachers. But it doesn't also follow that a school that only has qualified teachers is a good school, and for a school to have the flexibility to be able to employ some unqualified teachers, if in the judgment of the management of the school this is adding to what the school can offer in a beneficial way, it seems to be perverse for people to say that they shouldn't. I think it's too early to say. Clearly they need to be watched, and I think we need to be sure that parents who are sending their children to these schools are in a good position to judge in terms of what our society's expectations are, reasonable expectations are. These schools are actually providing a good education for their children. We can't rely, given the diversity of Britain, we can't necessarily rely entirely on the judgment of parents, particularly for groups of immigrant communities who often come from very rural backgrounds, who often don't have a easy command of English, and whose educational ambitions and aspirations for their children are probably well below what is necessary for those children to be able to prosper and fulfill themselves in our society. I've not studied, the whole range of them. As I said at the beginning, I was sort of puzzled and couldn't quite sort of understand where this was coming from. I think I do understand it better now, in that, for better or for worse, the present Minister of Education, Mr. Gove, has, I think, decided that by and large, local education authorities, in terms of providers of schools, primary and secondary schools throughout the country, in association with churches and all sorts of other organisations, local education authorities haven't been as good at providing good schools as they could be or should be. And I see free schools, along with academies, as one way of trying to ginger up, improve the provision. And the more I hear about free schools, I think the more I feel they're a good thing.